Cold open, everybody. Hi there. Not quite a cold open. We're listening to the music of Marian McPartland of Piano Jazz on NPR. I'm testing the volume to see where it should be appropriately set for your audiovisual pleasure. I'm starting with a direct-to-camera address for tonight's episode, which I think I'm going to call Back to the Grind, because we've just finished. I'm recording this on Monday, Easter Monday. We've just finished a very important Holy Week and a very important Holy Season. Again, when you think about Judaism, Christianity, and Islam is all part of the same tradition, the Abrahamic tradition. Oh, I see what happened over there. The funniest thing happened. Before I turn the camera on myself this evening after finishing a day of quote-unquote productive work, one of my scrolls over here that was attached to, oh, you see I went to the other side. Let me also break this out for you, right? Obviously, I've been having imaginary conversations with people. Sometimes they're famous people, sometimes they're people that I know. I sort of vary them, but it's usually the same type of person. Give or take a few nuances here and there, who I'm basically trying to engage around the multiple and increasing issues there are with whiteness and white supremacy and anti-blackness and anti-brownness, right? But particularly the continued dominance of white people over really the broad spectrum of dominant matters that affect people in this country. In other words, the dominant group of people in this country, right? The elite, which remains by and large predominantly white, or at least white appreciating. And like me, I detest whiteness. Even though I present visually as a white person, I rather think of myself as melanin deficient. Because frankly, that's what I am. Anyway, I'm speaking to you directly now because I checked my metrics today on YouTube. It's so handy, the metrics, and I realized when people are jumping from these videos. So part of what I've been doing in my, this is a fusion of my two projects right now on YouTube. D-Masterclass / Method to My Madness, which is a kind of how-to series, right? It's a do-it-yourself series. I was thinking of House of Style by Todd Oldham in particular, but also like This Old House with like Bob Vila. Even, shows like, Oprah or, Rachel Ray, whose studio I just passed, recording studio I just passed when I was in New York this weekend. Like the how-to segments on like different talk shows and night shows and things like that. That program, G-Master Class / Method to My Madness, was basically me just recording myself trying things out and like doing things, especially creative things, and trying, or rather experimenting with different methods of thinking about the world, or different methods of engaging the world, or different methods of comprehending the world, or different methods of reframing my experiences, or reframing my thoughts, right? For instance, if this idea sounds good to me in my head, what does it look like if I write it down in my notes, right? Or what does it look like if I attempt to try to represent it somehow, you know, in a more visual art fashion, right? Which gets us back to the point and one of the gambits of both D Masterclass and Hysterical Whiteness, and also my podcast series I'm trying to get out there into the world, is whether Sean M. Kennedy, me, your host / is with the most / is, whether I can get to the point, whether I can tell not necessarily a single story. I love Chimamanda Adichie Ngozi, but, well, in fact, that's what she warned of, right? I keep getting this confused in my head. She warned of the danger of a single story. And so what I've been trying to do in both of these, or also with my podcast, which I've recorded a lot of episodes of, but which I haven't really posted yet for various reasons, mostly because I'm really busy trying to manage like applying for academic jobs still, and I have a range of traditional pieces of writing that I want to get done. You know, I'm looking now at this scroll and thinking about metaphysics, which is making a big comeback right now in intellectual circles, and I think non-intellectual circles to cultural circles, although the buzzword metaphysics is definitely happening in intellectual circles. But metaphysics to me is simply the theory of physics, right? So how do things happen? How do things operate, right? How does energy, which is ultimately what physics is about, energy in different ways, different scales, like how do energies collide? Why do things explode, right? How is it that a sudden gust of wind comes out of nowhere, right? Why does it rain, right? These are all, very broadly speaking, questions that physics can answer. I famously took the easy version of physics in high school, but I did go to Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology outside of Washington, D.C., which is recently in the news because once again, Black students and Latinx students are horribly underrepresented. And I'm pausing to consider my words. Fairfax County Public Schools rightfully wants to change that. And it's an issue that I know a little bit about, in part because well, let me back up and say, they have established a change to their admissions procedures, which is to, it used to be you just got it on the basis of a test. They're changing their admissions policy to incorporate more factors than just the test. And it's projected, I suppose, based on the bit of research and reading I did yesterday, it's projected to increase fairly substantially, not just the population, still not enough, fairly substantially the population of I see where I'm going with this story. As I check my time, 10:42. I'm gonna get back to the scroll here that came flying open because a poster I had banished in the corner came flying down and revealed itself and pushed out the scroll. And I didn't understand exactly what had happened until I sat down and saw over there. You caught that live. By the way, sidebar, this is the other thing. I've become accustomed now to recording these nightly recaps on many nights of the week. My numbers are going up slowly but surely. You can subscribe for no cost to you whatsoever. It would just help me achieve my ultimate goal, which is 1,000 subscribers, because at 1,000 subscribers, I can broadcast live. So instead of recording this and, uploading it to YouTube, because I don't make edits, except when I cut the versions, because I also post a 15-minute version to Instagram, and then I post a 1-minute version to TikTok, but I also post a 1-minute version on my Twitter. So I'm just, again, taking you behind the scenes a little bit. That was one of the ideas I had for these programs, was to take you behind the scenes. Maybe into some conversations that you don't necessarily know about or didn't know existed, which is the same thing. I just said two things that are the same thing, but that's also the part of the other element here, which is live performance. And it's really fun for me. I enjoy doing this now. To go back to the story, the situation at Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology outside Washington, D.C. Given the new holistic admissions criteria, it's projected, and I don't have the numbers on me right now, but it's projected to fairly substantially increase the numbers of Black and Latinx students. It's also, and this is where it gets problematic and complicated, and a problem that I like to think about, and I'm hoping to write something about this, an op-ed, if I can find the time to do it this week. It's also projected to increase fairly substantially the number of white students, but it's going to substantially decrease the percentage of Asian American students. And that's where the controversy is now. Just like, right, that the interests of Black students and Latinx students have been pitted against the interests, supposedly, of Asian American students, because a lawsuit, in fact, lawfare, when conservative groups I don't want to raise the F word here for fascism, but fascist-leaning groups, potentially fascist, I would have to investigate that more, which I'm probably not going to do because I have a lot of other things on my plate. Right? Just repeatedly, sue on the basis of bogus legal grounds. So this case, because there is a lawsuit now against Fairfield County Public Schools arguing that, Asian American students are going to suffer discrimination or whatever. I haven't read the case, but it's tantamount to that. As somebody put it to me on Twitter today, it's the victimization of Asian American, which it's totally not, obviously. And frankly, that's a grotesque thing to say at this moment when Asian Americans are being targeted, right? Are becoming victim to white supremacist violence. Or just plain violence by white people against people who are not white. To me, that also constitutes white supremacist violence. But, your mileage will vary. You're not me. This is what I think, right? This case, it didn't happen. The same debate had been, quote unquote, debate had been happening a couple years ago in New York City, right? Where I lived for 20 years and where my family is from, going back generations. With Stuyvesant High School and Bronx High School for science and all the 7 or 8 specialized high schools that you have to apply to. It's the same debate that was happening. And I was paying attention to it because Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology is usually considered of the same elite category. They're all public schools, but they're heavily funded by the private sector. It's one of those it's almost these schools are almost like public-private partnerships. It's a very interesting tangent to go down in describing, but I'm not going to do that today to stay on point here. I'm also thinking about bringing these episodes to 21 minutes. We'll see. 21 minutes with, there we go. That's live improv, people. 21 minutes with Smack Alec. One of my alter egos, one of my avatars. It's just a fun play. The same issue, right, drew headlines just a couple years ago while I was teaching the graduates of New York City public schools, right, at Medgar Evers College, in Crown Heights, at Lehman College in the Bronx. And all of the students I ever taught at the City University of New York were just as bright as anybody that I've ever met, including myself, right? I mean, there's such a historical pattern to undo around not giving Black students the benefit of the doubt and realizing that they are just as bright as any other students, right? I mean, this whole garbage about, academic unpreparedness, right? Which so many schools, that institutions of higher education that draw or, students who are from working class families, right? Who are going to public schools because they can't afford to go to private schools, right? They get maligned regularly, right, in the press when they talk about public school reform, public education reform. They get maligned regularly, Black students, brown students across the spectrum, because I dare say, unlike most of the Asian American families in Northern Virginia who are handsomely rewarded professionals, like most of the families at Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. I mean, they have like virtually they have virtually no students who qualify for like reduced or free lunch. I think it's like 1.5%, and that might not even be the right metric, but it was when I was going to school there, and they also were virtually no working class students there, because again, that was a county, Fairfax County, that was in the early moment of becoming extremely rich. It now has the highest per capita, or is it average income of, well, it had it for many years in the country, but it was bested by Loudoun County, which is just to the west. And it's the number 2. So essentially, if you thought about it in terms of the average salary, right, of like 100,000, right? That's like people make the most money there in these 2 counties on average than in any other counties in the country. That's remarkable. But in New York City, it's such an enormously larger place with so many more people by multiple scales that Asian Americans, right, like everybody, white people, black people, Latinx people, run the gamut in diversity. You know, so there's poor, right, Asian Americans or you know, first generation, second generation, you know, Asian immigrants, right? There's, you know, wealthy. There's middle, you know what I mean? It runs the whole gamut, which is another way of saying spectrum. And to my knowledge, there was no lawsuit brought. It was just a lot of chatter, right, in New York City around this issue of the very high concentration of Asian Americans at the specialized high schools, and the very outrageous, doesn't even describe it, but I can't think of another word, the outrageously low numbers of Black and Latinx students. But there was a lawsuit brought against Harvard University. And I'm telling you some of the details as I look at the time. It's 23, so it might not be a 21. But again, talking out my ideas like this has become really, really, really helpful for me. And it also, you know, could potentially be another source of revenue for me down the line, although that's not the reason I'm doing it. The main reason I'm doing it is because I really enjoy it. And I had a lot of time, for various reasons, this academic year, which is now starting to come to a close. And I've been on that calendar for 11 straight years now, so I'm used to it. It's part of my rhythm. One of the things I did was to work on my presence, how I come across on video, right? The kinds of effects I can bring to the video, right? How do I look? You know, what are the backgrounds? You know, and it really went into these higher levels, right? Such as backgrounds. And I started to realize I really enjoyed doing this, and that I felt really comfortable on camera, and that, you know, I should just keep doing it. And then later on, I realized it just kept generating more and more insights for me, and I'm gonna incorporate a video element to my ongoing first book project, which is going to be for a general audience called Speculation, or the Long 80s autobiography of a knowledge worker in the era of disinformation, or the disinformation age. I haven't quite decided what I'm doing there. So anyway, long story short, right, I've been thinking of everything I've been doing on camera as a demonstration class. And actually, I guess this is going to be an episode for demonstration class, master class / method to my madness, because it's become all about the behind the scenes. And Hysterical Whiteness for me as a series actually is premised in my looking that way. As I look this way and think, there was a lawsuit at Harvard which was similar. And I don't know the nitty gritty of the law, but I do study the law. So I don't know the nitty gritty of the law in the way that a trained attorney does. But Harvard argued in favor of their admissions policy or their admissions criteria approach. And they were successful. And here's the weird bit of metaphysics, if you will, how people come together. The general counsel of Harvard at the time, right, who was charged with overseeing, and I might have some of the nuances here off, right, but was in charge of overseeing the university's response to the lawsuit that was brought, then became the president of the school that I was teaching at this year, and this academic year, and the academic year past, Gettysburg College. And the decision in the Harvard case was handed down during my first year at Gettysburg College, and I was a postdoctoral consortium for I was a consortium for faculty, it's a lot of words, a consortium for faculty diversity postdoctoral fellow, because of the research that I do on white supremacy, anti-Blackness, critical race and ethnic studies in particular, but also gender and sexuality studies, and studies in political violence and resistance movements, some other things. I'm a little bit bashful when I talk about it, but it's true, that's what I work on. So that's why my voice is a little bit lower. The decision was handed down while I was working there last academic year, not the one that's just closing. And I think I have it in my email archive still. I just haven't bothered to check that email archive in a long time because it's filled with triggering reminders of the traumatic experience I had there earlier this year when I was basically expelled from campus for being a whistleblower who called attention to multiple threats of violence and harm and was then subjected to various forms of harassment, apparently in order to silence me. Who knows? I never got an explanation, of course. Except for the bullshit one that I received in the letter they sent me when they expelled me from the campus, as if I was the one who was a danger. And I was, in a way. I was a danger to their fiscal solvency, because the last thing they needed was any students withdrawing from the semester because I had said, restraining from the academic year because I had said it was unsafe. And they knew that I was popular on campus and becoming more popular, in part because I was speaking out about this and leveling with my students about what was going on. So they essentially gave me a sabbatical. I've been paid ever since. And I've been reticent to speak more publicly about these details for fear of them revoking my pay, but I'm actually good. I have some savings because of, not because of generational wealth, although at this point my parents, who were the first in their respective families to create generational wealth, knowing that my parents are very comfortably retired in the way that white people in this country historically have been, especially white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, right? Of the type who built Harvard or Yale, probably also Gettysburg College, but I would have to double check on that. I forgot some of those details. There's only so much my brain can retain. Like anybody's brain, as I check the time, 32:14. That's why, like, I put the Chronicle of Higher Education on blast, as I did today on my Twitter stream. I'm like, academia is so far behind the times, which is what I also wrote in my op-ed that I circulated that I couldn't find a publisher for. What I'm doing on the camera right now, I highly doubt is even being recognized by anybody as relevant to academia, which is so typical of the insularity of the elite core of higher education that is academia. And so as I say this, the 21-second mark has passed. We'll see if I get a job in academia, but guess what? I don't need one. It didn't go off. I'm still working at the King.